Hello, everybody. It's Maritza Grooms, and we're here on History in Lowell. And today, my partner is actually my guest.
Very
hey,
good.
Bob. It is so good to see you. It's good to be back in the studio with you.
Yes, it's nice to be seen, actually. So yeah, I'm happy to be here, for sure.
Oh my goodness. And for our viewers at home, you don't know, but it's been about 3 months since we've been back in the studio. So this is really a special treat for all of us. We're celebrating, and we're celebrating something that Bob has worked on. Bob, tell us about it.
So this actually is a new book. I don't want to brag, but it's my 9th book.
You should brag. Yeah.
But at any rate, this probably of all of them, this was very much more so, I think, than others, a labor of love. And so the title is "Where Are the Workers?" And it's basically asking this question about where in the way we think about American history, the way that we portray American history, and the way that history is taught in museums and galleries and parks, national parks, state parks, and what have you. Where are working people? Where are working families? Why is it that, for the most part, in the research I did and the work that others did to contribute to the book, why is it that workers are largely missing from that history? Black workers, white workers, Latino workers, farm workers, nurses, factory workers. Just generally speaking, workers don't make it into archives. Thus, when history is written, and when history is made manifest in a national park or a local historical site, generally speaking, workers are missing from the story. Hence the question, where are the workers?
I love the title of that book, and I love that it's really kind of like representative of what we do here on this show, bringing forth the history that doesn't get told. And when you don't tell a big chunk of the important parts, then we're kind of lying. And it's almost like, I think I saw a line somewhere describing the book. It's like Alzheimer's for for the nation, right? And so when you were thinking of putting this book together, you said it was a labor of love. And I know your background. Do you want to share your background with the audience?
Yeah, so I mean, actually this is probably something that's been burning inside of me for like 40 years. And so when I actually went to college, I was the first person in my family to go. I went to Northeastern University because it had co-op and it was really cheap then, not like what it is now. Sticker shock, it was $390 a semester. But at any rate, while I was on campus, what got me thinking is I saw a sign for a rally about a strike. General Electric workers were on strike in Lynn at this really large factory in Lynn, Massachusetts. And I said, oh, I'll go and see what this is about. So I went, and it wasn't so much a rally in support of the strike as a group of students talking about how backward and horrible the working class was. And I thought, wait, like this doesn't make any sense to me, number one, because we're supposed to be supporting this strike and what happened. And also because I'm a working class kid and my dad is a union person, and I know who he is and who his friends are, I'm thinking, wait, what you're describing doesn't match up. There's something that's disconnecting here. And it sort of always sort of bugged me, like how do we think about this? And as we progressed, I think, in American political history these days, I do feel like workers get a bad rap. And from Hillary Clinton talking about the basket of deplorables and these other things, and Donald Trump trying to exploit working class fears of immigration and job loss and other things, and baiting people around questions of race, we've never really, the Democratic Party has sort of lost its ability to talk to workers. And again, we don't have places where people can go and get and understand that history and how much progress has been made for a larger society through working class struggle. And so again, the idea in the book was, okay, let me find people who I know are doing interesting research on black sharecroppers in Mississippi in the Great Depression, and Latinx farm workers in Texas, and how their history is portrayed, and what different people in New Jersey from a big textile strike, in 1911, and the Bread and Roses strike in Lawrence, and let's really look at a bunch of places and think about this in an intelligent way, and let's call on the carpet, in a way, big institutions who are supposed to be doing a job interpreting American history and are doing it poorly, in my humble estimation.
Oh yeah, you only know a little bit about history.
Yeah. Well, I mean, right. I mean, in a way, it's like a culmination, because it does contain in it lots of stuff I've been working on and thinking about for quite a while. And my co-editor, Marianne Trasciati, who teaches at Hofstra in New York, is the chairperson of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory Fire Committee that's been trying since 2011 to get a memorial in New York City, the Triangle Factory Fire, of which, until they started working on this, there was no historical marker. And it's one of the most incredible stories in American history, not just labor history, the fire and what happened. 110 immigrant workers lost their lives in this factory fire. And the building where the fire happened is owned by NYU, New York University. And NYU resisted for years letting some sort of a marker be put on their building.
What is the
I mean, it's taken until now. Now it's being constructed, and next year, in 2023, in March, on the anniversary of the fire, it should be installed. And I'm excited about being able to go and participate in the in that when it would be a good show for us to do a road trip. But at any rate, so she and I worked on this together and sort of thought about, again, the work that I did around the centennial of the Bread and Roses strike and the work she did on the centennial. That's how we met, each working on this 100th anniversary of these two major events, and we've been friendly ever since. And so we said, okay, let's collaborate on a book, and let's try to have this conversation in a more meaningful way.
Yeah, that's really incredible. And I think it really boggles my brain why it takes so much for these untold stories to be brought to the forefront or to be honored in some way. And I feel like even here in Lowell, we talk about it, but we have, certain memorials up for some people and some not for others. Why do you think it's such a struggle to get these stories told?
I mean, I think it's a few things. I think one thing is that if you're talking about class in America and in American history, the way history is taught, that issue makes people uncomfortable. People don't want to think about America as a society of classes. They want to think about it's very homogenized and fluid, and you can rise above whatever, and that inequality and struggle are really not baked into the American story. And so it doesn't play well with this more celebratory kind of a way a lot of history gets taught. It's why we've talked about here many times why questions of where the cotton came from in Lowell's cotton mills isn't really discussed that much. It makes people uncomfortable. People get twitchy. Okay, now you're going to talk about race. Oh crap, what am I going to do, right? And so they're different. I mean, questions of class and race are different, but certainly questions of class contain questions of race and vice versa. And so sometimes that makes people uncomfortable. The other thing that's happened over time is archives, even places like the Center for Lowell History, but also like Mass Historical Society or the Boot Mill Museum, or other big parks and museums around the country, don't necessarily collect in what one of the authors of a chapter in the book talks about as purposeful collection. In other words, what he's suggesting, Connor Casey is his name, he's one of the librarians at the University of Washington, and he heads up their labor archive. And he talks about how when he started working there, they did an assessment of what wasn't in the collection, and then made a determination that for several years they were going to collect what wasn't there, as opposed to continuing to collect what already was. and that they were going to fill the gaps. And then that by filling the gaps, historians would have the stuff that they need to be able to write community-based histories or union histories or histories of labor struggle or struggles of race and white workers and black workers or white workers and Asian workers or whatever it would be, but there would be material. Because for historians, for me, when I write other kinds of history, I need stuff.
Yeah.
I can't wing it. But if the stuff I need has never been thoughtfully collected, if people haven't purposely gone out and found it, then it's difficult. So part of what we were talking about, some of the chapters in this book talk about that, purposeful collection that fills gaps. And you mentioned it earlier, in West Virginia, they opened the Mine Workers Museum. And when they opened the museum, the great-grandson of a person who had been the president of a local mine workers union in West Virginia says, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but basically says, if you blot out our history, if you wipe out the memory that we existed, it's like we have community Alzheimer's. And they don't need guns anymore to suppress us. They just basically can do whatever they want because we don't understand where anything came from. And we don't understand our background story. And thus we're easily, as he put it, we're easily led astray. And so he's excited about the opening of this museum because, again, there's a very purposeful engagement with generations of miners, and a call goes out to collect stuff that might be in people's attics that can help them, tell this story, and it's really significant.
So that must have been really difficult then to put this work together because it's a collection of various essays, right, from different people in the labor history that you study. How did you get those stories?
So Marianne and I thought for a while about what we wanted to do. So we had criteria. We wanted to be something that looked at gender. We didn't want it to just be about guys. We also didn't want it just to be about white guys, because if it's just about white guys, it actually goes against the idea of what we were trying to present in the book in the first place. We also wanted to be geographically representative. We wanted to look at the South. We wanted to look at the West. We wanted to look at the Northwest. We just didn't want it to be about New York and Massachusetts.
Right.
So we didn't want it to just be she and I reflecting on what we've done. And so then basically what we did is we created a description of what we were looking for, and we posted the description on a bunch of labor history websites, through social media. We just said we're interested in anybody that might want to, contribute a chapter to this volume that we're working on, and we got maybe 40 to 50 inquiries about wanting to submit work, and we knew we couldn't do that many simply because we couldn't create it. It would be too big, too expensive, and nobody would read it. So we thought, okay, well, maybe if we had 10 or 11 chapters, and we wrote a fairly extensive introduction that talked about our work, but also sort of themes of the book, and then we wrote introductory sections to each of the parts of the book, that would be our contributions, and then we would prod people to do their work and get it to us on time. And so it was a process. It took probably a little over 2 years from when we put the call out. Once we got the chapters and we kind of knew what we were going to do, we then basically went to this publisher, the University of Illinois, which was really where our first choice. They have a working class history series, and we wanted it to be in that series if we could, for all kinds of reasons. And we pitched the idea to them with a table of contents, and within a few days they said, yep. Yes. It doesn't usually work that way, so they were very excited about the project. Usually they wait until they get stuff. They don't usually commit and do a contract so quickly. But then we knew we actually were on the right track, that we had a good idea, that it was filling a void. And so that also then really helped. The other thing that we did is when we were thinking about, when we had so many chapters, the other thing that we did very consciously is pick authors who, in many cases, were new faculty at colleges and universities.
Aw.
So we would be sort of helping their careers. That getting things published is really hard, but it's part of the requirement for people to keep their job.
Oh gosh.
And we thought that if we could, the same way people treated us well, I feel like I was treated well when I started out by people who were willing to take my work and put it in an anthology like this one. I thought, okay, we'll return the favor. And so basically several of the people are, fairly new at the institution where they teach. And we felt like we were being helpful and sort of playing it forward or backward or whatever, I don't know, whatever the term is, but we were playing it somewhere.
Just another layer of intention there.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah, good word. I mean, that was very intentional in terms of thinking. We just didn't, because we got a lot from really well-established
Of course.
people, and we put a few of those in there. But we thought, no, if we just do that, then we're not doing what we think a good scholar should be,
Yeah.
a senior scholar in their career should be doing.
Yeah, and it gives a wide breadth of work there too, because if you have people who are well established, they may also still be telling some of the same stories, but if you have new people with new perspectives, there's energy there, and there's something, once again, what's missing from what you're already doing.
Yeah, and that's really, again, sort of, I mean, one of these chapters that we were really excited when we got it was somebody who has been writing for a while about Latino murals in Texas, and about how on old farmhouses, old barns, even on buildings where people let them, people are painting community people are painting murals depicting their history, particularly farm worker history, but also community organizing history on the sides of building. And so he wrote he's been working on this for a while. And so we have some photographs of the murals on the sides of some of the buildings. And so that was really an innovative chapter, again, because we don't necessarily think of a mural as a collectible in that way, but it is, and with the ability to scan and photograph and whatever, you can create that sort of collection. And so that was really an exciting place. We also did one on the Southern Tenant Farmers Union, and that was a lot of black farm workers, landless farm workers who were organizing and were evicted from their property. And there was also a sort of armed conflict where white farmers sort of came down on the organizing that black sharecroppers were doing in their communities. And that's another one where the university in Arkansas purposefully has started collecting material. And Rachel Donaldson is the woman's name who's been working on that. And so she's got a chapter in there looking at that. There's a chapter on these labor murals that were done in Maine, which is really interesting because they were done under a Democratic administration, and they hung in a state building in Maine. And then when a conservative Republican governor was elected, he ousted the murals from the building. Fortunately, they weren't destroyed, but they were taken down, and it created this big controversy about the history, and the history being out and then hidden, taken down. And so there's a cool chapter in there about sort of that work. There's one about Barry, Vermont, where Italian stonemasons came to Barry, which has really got some of the largest quarries in the country. And they basically were granite miners, but also they did gravestones and other markers, and they were instrumental in supporting the Bread and Roses strike. But it's also a really rich history, which people in Barry are beginning to retell. There's a socialist labor hall that they've renovated and rejuvenated and is on the National Register of Historic Places. And so they tell the story of that happening. So it's exciting. So there's a chapter on Seattle, and sort of struggles in the greater Seattle area. I'm trying to think of the geography. New Jersey, So yeah, Texas, Arkansas, West Virginia,
Wow.
North Carolina. Yeah, I mean, it was really something to do. The other part of this that for me, like, engaged me with this, a friend of mine, Jim Green, was a labor historian who taught at UMass Boston for years and years and years, and passed away from cancer a few years ago. And actually, I'm very excited because in a couple of weeks, I'm giving the Jim Green memorial lecture on a Saturday in Boston and talking about the book, which is really cool. But Jim was one of these labor historians who very much wanted historians to engage with their publics and not just be writing for other historians.
Yes.
And called hard for this, and became very engaged in this process. In Ludlow, Colorado, there was, back in 1913, this horrendous massacre of workers and their families during a coal strike. And the massacre was ordered on the workers by the Rockefeller family, which owned the coal mines. And they basically machine gunned this worker community and killed large numbers of people during the strike. And eventually, Mine Workers Union built a memorial in Ludlow, Colorado, where this all happened. And in several years ago, the memorial was defaced. And the statues depicting this family who died, somebody went in and cut the heads off, the husband and the wife, and cut the arm off the wife of these were beautiful statues in this cemetery, and just desecrated it. And the woman's holding her baby in her arms, and just desecrated the statue. And that motivated him to become very public about engaging in essentially redoing the marker.
Yeah.
And he wrote this article, again, sort of challenging labor historians. And I use the article a lot in my classes, and part of the inspiration for the book is his ringing in my ears of, we need to engage with the community, with our publics, with our communities. We learn more by doing that.
Right.
And so ultimately they did restore the marker, and it got recognized as a national historical site, which was really important for the community to do. And so that's part of the impetus for this as well, like that lesson that he taught people. Right, it's sort of all tied together in sort of my kind of like life story of like knowing Jim for as long as I did, and sort of his thoughts resonate. As we were putting this together, I was thinking he would like this if he was still around.
What a way to honor all of that history and honor Jim. It makes me think, though, like what we do here and how important it is bringing this history to people in a way that is digestible for somebody like me who just wants to pick up a book and learn, but not necessarily, I'm not going to read an academic paper, well, maybe I would actually. Other people might not.
Yeah.
But, how hard it might be to really understand the history. And I think it's also timely considering just 2 years ago, we were celebrating and praising workers and the people who are on the front line, and here we are still kind of in a pandemic and not acknowledging those people. What did we do but just call them heroes? Yeah,
well, so we dedicate this book to the 146 workers who lost their lives in the 1911 Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, to the 1912 Bren Rosa strikers, and to the countless frontline workers who stepped forward to take care of us in the 2020-2021 COVID-19 pandemic. May their stories be collected, preserved, and told in the coming years. Great minds think alike. Yeah, I mean, we thought, again, sort of, okay, what's the, right? I mean, the Lawrence History Center has been engaged for 2 years in collecting stories of pandemic workers, and there's actually going to be a volume coming out in the near future. When it does, we'll definitely have to have the editor author of that book, who teaches in the sociology department at the university. We'll definitely have to have her come on and talk about the book. Maybe she can get 1 or 2 people with her who told their stories as part of it. There's also good news too on that front, in that, and we've had Maria Abar on here before talking about the Latinx Community Center, and they just got a big grant from Mass Humanities to collect oral histories in their community, which haven't been collected before.
Amazing.
Which is very much sort of in this continuum.
Yes.
So there's another show we can do in the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's going to be Indigenous history signages going up around from work that was done all last year to sort of get that history out in front of the public more. So yeah, there's plenty to do. There's plenty to do.
Yes, and there's plenty that is being done. Bob, this work I feel like is so important. It tells the story of America in a way that we don't usually see. And thank you for doing this, as always. Thank you for bringing us in. And I know for a fact that you can find this book at one of my favorite bookstores right across the street, Lala's.
Yes.
So if anybody is interested in reading more about the stories of workers who haven't been told, make sure to grab this book. Is it at the library too? Can people check it out?
I think it's at the library, but I'm not sure.
Well, we should get it. That's the next
thing. It should
thing
be in there if it's not.
Yeah.
I know it's in the university library. Definitely a labor of love.
Yes, and this, what we do here is a labor of love. And I'm so honored and so glad I get to do it with you and sit across from you.
And I with
so
you,
many
so
months.
let's be really clear.
Yes.
We couldn't do this each without the other. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work.
My buddy Bob, everybody. Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you all for tuning in, and be sure to check out Where Are the Workers? You've been watching History in Lowell.